My name's Erin, I am Sorrel's parent chaperone. We'd been passed a leaflet for a participatory workshop for Vincent Dance Theatre. It would have been in June, I think, of this year. And it looked like an extraordinary workshop in its own right, you know, regardless of what was to come next. So Sorrel went along and she was part of a whole array of children and young people from across Brighton. Didn't expect anything of it actually. It was more about the joy of working with some professional contemporary dancers that day and experiencing, I guess, a bit of the industry, but also the feel of what that might be working with adult dancers. And it was an extraordinary day. Sorrel has really discovered contemporary dance, probably from about the age of 4 or 5, doing, you know, community dance ballet classes and stuff at school, and then some after school clubs, but then got more serious about her ballet. And then we were seeing quite a lot of contemporary dance at the theatre, including a Vincent Dance Theatre piece a while ago. Not knowing anything that would be on the horizon, but just thinking about how it was moving her as a young person. And then she started contemporary dance classes in Brighton at about the age of 11. So not masses of experience. She also did a performance called Men and Girls Dance when she was about 9 or 10. And I think that moved her to the point of wanting to do more, but not knowing that would be in her young years. There were Thursdays and Fridays in the rehearsal studio, and I would drop her off and then hear about it afterwards. So there would be reports coming back from the company, from Charlotte, from the project manager, but also Sorrel was telling stories at the end of each day as to the kind of process and the depth and the exploration and the uncertainty that was that entire chapter. But no, I didn't see anything until we had a sharing at the studio here. It would have been a week before going out on tour. So Thursdays and Fridays, rather than being at school, she was getting to be dancing all day with extraordinary professional dancers and devising. And what was most interesting about her experience and what she was talking about when she was coming home was how much of herself she was able to bring to that and be part of the process, and that to see your ideas or your material then played back or then put into rehearsal processes. Even though she was an understudy, she was very much part of the creative process. She would talk about the uncertainty, the play, the messiness, the joy. Sometimes they were doing Irish jigs, sometimes they were, you know, in quite long, mildly traumatic improvisations, if you know, to look at it with the lens that the show finally became. So we had a conversation before the rehearsal process, and then I had a conversation with Charlotte, who was really careful to lay out the territory that the rehearsal process might explore. So we knew it might look at Ukrainian experiences, we knew it might involve children in the war, and we knew that it was going to be COVID specific about loss and separation and a disconnect. So all those kind of things we'd spoken about before the rehearsal process, Sorrel and ourselves. Sometimes she would come home saying, we've explored with, today we've been ripping apart bin bags and we're looking at clothes, and we think it could be about fleeing or the refugee experience, but also it could be about being separated from, being in care and having your possessions taken. And actually, we're not told, we don't know. It's just how we feel that we're bringing to that bit of the improvisation. So it could be many things and none of them. And in a way, I think she felt that because it wasn't prescribed, it wasn't told what that experience would be, you could bring to whatever you wanted to in that moment. And so I feel like that's also come through in the final performance, is it's so layered with so many different interpretations. When those bin bags are ripped open, it's, you know, it remains incredibly authentic because it's real to that person who's performing it in that moment. Sorrel had an unusual journey because we had been fully expecting that in an understudy role, which we'd carefully spoken about, and Charlotte had been at pains to explain that this very much would be part of the rehearsal and the creative process, but that there would be that moment of stepping back. And that was completely part of the experience that we were expecting, anticipating. It would have its own emotional, you know, stepping away is always difficult, but always that with that care of feeling involved, which I think we both really cherished. So But then there was this kind of twist in the drama, in that poor Hannah twisted her ankle, literally days before the first performance. And so we rushed to the dance space because suddenly we were able to see Sorrel and she was able to perform. But what had been so amazing about the journey to that point was it didn't actually feel like she was thrust into the experience. She'd been so fully immersed in what has become, or what became on that bit of the tour that she was in, a bit of a family experience. So there was a load, the care and the nurturing of all the young people really came true at that moment, because it was a very natural place for her to step into and also then step away from. So she had this extraordinary experience of actually performing, and for all of us that was a joy to watch, because you never think that's going to happen, but also for her I think it just took it to something that was indelible and I'm going to say it, transformative. There's a moment where for many young people dance is participatory and wonderful, and it's an expression of so many feelings and just an expression of life. And there's another moment where actually it becomes something that is really serious for you, and you realise you want to commit to that as an art form for yourself. And I think that's the journey for Sorrel in this experience of her being able to participate in something quite so extraordinary, but also perform and learn from and work alongside adult dancers. And that there has been a bit of transformation in that suddenly she's looking at this as something she wants to progress into as a young dancer. And we can't be more excited, but for her I think it's a real discovery in her life. There's something really interesting about that dynamic that isn't young dancer with fresh out of dance school dancer. The relationship is genuinely intergenerational, because you see this massive gap as an audience member, and then the profound connection that is made more visible, I guess, with that age gap. And I guess for Sorrel, that experience of being able to dance alongside, and genuinely the parity in that experience that's created is more profound, maybe because of the age difference and the fact that they are, can I say, mature dancers in their years. We had a meeting even rehearsals about the significance of safeguarding for this project, and the nature of touring, the nature of being in a space with other adults, and it, there was a huge bible of material that some of us read, some of us skimmed, and I've been across safeguarding practice in my work for a very long time, and so I've seen it from various angles and experienced it on both sides. And for this, the level of attention to detail was, I could see why it was so significant, but also it was played out with that sense of due diligence and care as opposed to protocols. So that kind of played out across the whole touring experience. And the due diligence, or that's a really formal word, but what I mean is the care and safety of those young people, from the very point of travel to accommodation to working hours, of course, and then to the experience in the theatre. I haven't ever been a parent chaperone before, and I was naive to think that I could sit in the theatre in proximity and know we were right on stage at all times, and that was a new experience for me. We had a conversation with Charlotte at the very beginning about the process that would make sure that this would be age appropriate. So any material, and the marketing said from the beginning it was for 14 plus, and the only 14 plus member of the company of the young people was Sorrel, so that there was an appropriate way that younger performers would either have headphones, or they would be off stage, or they would not be part of those scenes. So that was very carefully handled. And then, because Sorrel was of age and was an understudy, she did get to see quite a lot of that material and experience it as an audience member might, and experience the process of it growing as well and refining as a piece. So she was really immersed in quite a different way. I think the clue is in the dance theatre bit of this work, in that there's two things that are at play for me. One is that you bring, as devised theatre, you bring so much of yourself into the process, which is hugely uncertain. could be anything pretty much to 10 minutes before the first dress rehearsal, and the fact that it's very live, so it changes even in the course of a touring piece. So that nature of live theatre, and that you've brought so much authenticity into it as a performer, is really exciting space to be in. It's different from so much choreographed, linear, very storytelling based pieces, and so does need that kind of different lens. I've seen it lots of times from many angles, including really in the dark in the wings and just listening. And for me, actually it's changed quite often. It depends what I'm bringing to it and the mood or the frame of mind that I've been in. Sometimes I can feel like it's such a bleak work because it's so challenging and it's so raw and it's so riddled with war and desperate, humanity in that moment. But so riding through it, so much is that hope. But it's not a saccharine, or it's not layered and linear. It comes through in the real, I guess the visible nature that's very stark of the children, the young people who do very little in terms of their presence sometimes, but their very presence on stage is that beacon of hope. Their relationship with the adults who are clearly irritated by them, and they represent so many times I've watched it, and they've been the kind of cynics and the hopeless in the space, like I've sometimes brought as a viewer. So for me, the surprising thing about it, from on the face of it looking sometimes quite bleak, actually there is this fierce hope that comes through, and that's been, I think, refined in the performances as the tour has grown as well. I'm not going to lie, it was a roller coaster. This is not light work, and Sorrel is 15, and so perhaps absorbs or is a bit more porous to the themes of the piece. That coupled with me having to insist that we were doing schoolwork literally on the back of every single rehearsal and on the train and in the hotel room, just because, again, schoolwork was important. There was no doubt this was more important as an experience, but trying to balance the two was tricky, and joyful in some instances, and in others really exhausting. And I think it's not light work. So she was carrying perhaps more than perhaps younger performers might be, because as an understudy she was watching quite a lot of material. So while younger performers were perhaps preparing and getting ready and really focused on their own performance, Sorrel was sitting in both camps. And I think there was one occasion where she came home from rehearsal and was really shaken, and what she'd experienced was really profound, had really moved her, had really challenged her, and that was a really important part of the process, because none of it was disturbing. It was the fact that theatre and art can really do this to you. It can move your soul and can make you think about the world in a very different way. And I think that was part of the roller coaster. It's been really important work.